know about today, but at least from yesterday addressed to me, so I'll just quickly answer those before we hand it over to Ajahn Sudhiro. Venerable Ajahn Yanako, how do you decide when it's time to move your repaired knee when it's uncomfortable during meditation? So when I sit in the Thai polite posture known as puppy up, it's probably the worst posture for this repaired knee that I have. It wasn't that major of a surgery. I had a torn meniscus, and they went in and cleaned it up when I was in Thailand this last time. So it's probably about 5 months ago now, a little over 5 months ago. So it's doing really well. But it just reminds me that it's there, and I just have a sense for it when to move it. It doesn't really hurt, but I can feel that it might not be good for it. So it's just kind of an intuitive sense for it. I don't check any manuals or anything about these types of things. I don't know why this one was asked to me, but Ajahn Yanako, can you please describe a time when you had to work skillfully with difficult kamma and what that process looked like? And I'd say too many times to count, so I can't really pinpoint one particular time that I had to work skillfully with difficult kamma. So I'm just going to set that one aside. Okay, Ajahn Sudhiro.
All right, good afternoon. Continuing on with some more of the questions from yesterday and then a few more from today. And since Ajahn Yanako has a microphone now, I might include him as well if there are some questions that I think he might have better answers for. Okay, dear Ajahn Krinadhammo, Ajahn Yanako, and Ajahn Sudhiro, what is your most favorite teaching from Lumpur Cha for each of you? Can you please share your thoughts on that? And how has this teaching helped you? And it says, P.S. What is sutta that you mentioned in Thai or Pali? Okay, so I guess I can start. In Lumpur Cha's teachings, there's so many things that I found incredibly inspiring. I think his emphasis on uncertainty, not sure, meine, always, seeing everything as being not sure, whether one has good or bad days, or good or bad meditations. There's always something which is not a sure thing. His emphasis really on, letting go. So, I think those are two of his main teachings that have stood out for me. But he also I've been, incredibly inspired just reading his life story, and particularly, I find with him, I have read quite a lot of different biographies of different Kruba Ajahns and very well respected teachers, and for so many of them, oftentimes they had a lot of success in their practice very, very quickly. There's many examples of the great masters who, pretty much from the first year or two, they were, accessing very deep states of samadhi and having all kinds of incredible insights. And, some of them had finished their work or almost finished their work within, a handful of years. And, reading those stories is, it is quite inspiring, but it's also sometimes a little bit, can make one feel a little bit depressed about oneself, maybe. So Lumpur Cha is an example of, a couple of monks, a couple of the Kruba Ajahns that I've read their biographies who, didn't have it easy in the beginning. Lumpur Cha and a few others, spent many years struggling, and Lumpur Cha, I think he didn't even really begin to seriously meditate until he was like maybe 7 or 8 years as a monk. And if you read his biography, he tells a story of being 7 or 8 pansa and trying to meditate, and he said his mind was more peaceful when he wasn't meditating than when he was meditating. So there's kind of like an insight he learned, through failing. Learned like in that particular situation, he started to realize, oh, maybe I'm trying too hard. Maybe the putting forth this effort in meditation is actually agitating the mind. And reading all of his stories, he put forth incredible effort and really suffered an incredible amount and made a lot of mistakes. And it probably wasn't really until he had been a monk for 10, 11, 12 years, that period of time, when his practice really started to come together and it really started to bear a lot of fruit. But that's quite a lot of time, many years that he had to spend, and especially also reading. I think after maybe his 5th year as a monk, he was actually thinking of disrobing. He was thinking of possibly going back to the world, because he just felt like, maybe the monk's life wasn't really right for him, and maybe he wasn't really going to be able to make much progress in meditation. So, I think that that's also really, one of the most inspiring things that I find about Lumpur Cha is that, in the end, he went on to become this incredible meditation master. But, unlike many of the other meditation masters, that path that he took, it wasn't something that was easy or automatic for him. It was something that took many, many years. I'm not sure if Ajahn Yanniku want to share anything.
Yeah, there's so many possible answers to that question. More than one notable thing. There's many notable aspects of his teaching that are impactful to me. But I think maybe just that sense of him being able to touch a wide range of people and where they are with their practice, all the way from the most basic teachings to people who are new to the practice, all the way to incredibly sublime insights and very pithy ways of summarizing them. So just the breadth of his ability to teach others was incredibly impressive to me. Anywhere from basically how to clean a toilet, which he could give instructions on how to properly do that, all the way to one of the more profound teachings that he gave that I just love to chew on and experience or experiment with, I guess I should say, was his teaching that he got in his short time from Ajahn Mun. He was just with Ajahn Mun for a few days, but found it very impactful in his practice with the basic teaching from Ajahn Mun and his insight around it of the mind being separate from the objects of mind. Was a very impactful and life-changing experience for him. So I like to spend time contemplating that myself.
Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint any actual single teachings of Ajahn Chah that would be like a favorite. There are a few that stick out, like the first teaching of Ajahn Chah that I read at the beginning of the book, Still Forest Pool, saying, why don't you step over here where it's cool, out of the battle? Why not give it a try? Do you dare? And I remember thinking, yes, I dare. Or his one-liners, like, if you let go a little bit, you get a little peace. If you let go a lot, you get a lot of peace. If you let go completely, you get complete peace. So easy to remember teachings, or very inspiring teachings, where one of the most inspiring teachings I remember from Ajahn Chah for me was him talking about that he tried so many different ways of practice, and that he said the results of practice and all the things the Buddha spoke about do really exist, but you really have to practice to reach them, and only when you do that will you know, and all of your doubts will come to an end. So very, very inspiring teachings like that, where he just gives his testimony to the truth of the Buddha's teachings and the results of practice. So those are a few that come to mind.
Thank you. And for the second part of your question, the word sutta is the Pali word for the recorded teachings of the Buddha, which were originally passed orally, later written down. But this is the word that we use to refer to the all of the recorded discourses and teachings of the Buddha. What is your opinion on organ donation, even though it is usually considered as a virtue to donate one's organs after one passes away? I heard the spirit or the mind may still remain in the body, and pain sensation is lingering, and this may interfere with rebirth. I guess for myself, I can't say too much about really if it's would potentially interfere with one's rebirth in that way. I mean, I think for myself, the most important thing would be your intention in wanting to donate your organs, and that's certainly a very wholesome intention. Wanting to help other people. So I would tend to guess that your spirit would be all right, no matter what happened. Even just if one was still kind of stuck in the body, then I think just reflecting on that intention that one had and that action, it's probably quite a beautiful way to end one's life. To leave this world knowing that you're leaving with an act of generosity. Okay, dear Ajahns, any advice or techniques for those of us who spend much time in neutral delusion and confusion? Thank you so much. I think that this is where a lot of us probably spend a lot of time. And for myself, like states of delusion, confusion, I mean, certainly we can say that, all of our defilements come from delusion, ultimately. But when I'm thinking of the question, kind of neutral states, thinking like, states of where the mind is cloudy, so we're kind of confused and in doubt. For myself, tend to experience these states of mind as kinds of mental weakness, like looking at all of the hindrances, the defilements. They tend to move the mind in one of two directions, either towards agitation and say like having too much energy, or being too hot, being too desire, anger. The mind is really kind of agitated and almost boiling. And the other extreme is kind of like, like the Buddha using the simile of like a water with like algae on the top, on the surface of the water. This kind of like, very thick, stagnant water, or kind of muddy water. So that's a good image for the mind that is in a state of delusion or confusion. It's kind of the opposite of really high energy, agitated, restless state. It's more like a really dark and low energy state. I feel like the way to work with those states of mind is trying to always bring the mind into a state of balance. So if the mind is in a very low state, then we have to learn how to create energy in the mind, how to kind of pick the mind up. And there's many ways to do that. There's practical ways like we're oftentimes encouraged to do like walking meditation, so we can change the posture of the body. If we're sitting and we feel very dull and kind of depressed or in kind of a neutral, confused state, we can physically change the posture of the body. Walking is a much more energetic posture, so that just naturally has an effect on the mind. Another good, practical technique is, finding something that interests the mind. That's really a very good technique for creating energy. And even if you have to read something, oftentimes living in the monastery, we might read Dhamma books, and that can be a very skillful way of dealing with a very low states of energy, especially if you can find something that interests the mind, then the mind, immediately brightens. And we can also use contemplation, if there's things that we would like to think about, we can allow the mind to think and to contemplate things that it's interested in, so long as we have mindfulness. And that can really pick the mind up out of those states. Also, lastly, like working with the actual feeling in the body. So I always find it very helpful to, try to create the opposite feeling in the body. So these very low mental states, they tend to be kind of too soft, and too loose. So it's kind of trying to create feelings of solidity and strength in the body. And one very practical example is just, oftentimes we're taught if you feel drowsy in meditation, you should just sit up very, very straight, and making the posture just very straight. This creates a feeling of solidity in the body, which it has an effect on the mind, and it can help to kind of pull the mind out of that dullness. All of our defilements, very much like a river or something that's trying to wash us away. And these different techniques and different objects of mindfulness, it's kind of like grabbing a hold of something, or grabbing a hold of a branch that's sticking out into the river or something to prevent ourselves from being washed away. And so there are also many other ways of creating sensations of solidity in the body, but those are just a few techniques that I find helpful. Okay, why do we have a restricted sleep schedule on retreat? This just seems to have the effect of making me fall asleep for all of my sits and dullness in all of my walks. With metta, thank you. Yeah, it's a good, it's a good question. I think it is important, especially in monasteries, we have this issue a lot. Like you have a particular schedule, but different people are different, and some people find different schedules more helpful. Particularly with dullness and drowsiness, some people just tend to have more energy than other people. So some people need more sleep than others, and the schedule that we're following here is quite similar to the schedule that we follow at Abhayagiri. It's good to reflect, actually, that a lot of monasteries, which are more strict than Abhayagiri, we actually would tend to get less sleep. Like I remember staying in Thailand. There it's like the morning bell is 3 a.m. And so the morning chanting starts at either 3:30 or 3:15, and the bell, starts going at 3 a.m. And sometimes you might be up late as well. Sometimes there might be a Dhamma talk. It might be, 9, 10 before you get back to your dwelling, or sometimes even later. So, there it can be even more difficult, even more extreme. So here, having lived in different places, this kind of schedule does feel kind of like the middle way, but, certainly for some people, it might not really feel like the middle way. In general, the idea of kind of restricting the sleep a little bit is, because we tend to have the tendency to, to oversleep, and it's the same with like food as well. We tend to have the tendency to overeat. The danger in oversleeping, same with overeating. If we kind of indulge or do it too much, it actually has a negative effect. So probably everyone has the experience of having slept 8 to 10 hours or something, and just feeling horrible, or feeling like more tired, than before you slept or something. So sleep and also eating is something that we have to do in moderation, and following a schedule like this is one way to really help us to find that place of balance. Because if we were just on our own, maybe if we have a lot of discipline and we've lived in monasteries for a long time, maybe we would be fine. We'd be able to wake up early. But for most people, if they don't have that kind of structure, then they would just tend to sleep very late, and it would tend to make the mind more drowsy during the day, and then also we would tend to sleep during the day as well. It's quite common in monasteries sometimes, if the schedule is open, some of the monks might just sleep all afternoon if they're having a really difficult time. Sleep is a way that we can deal with our suffering. It's one of in monasteries or a situation like this, it's kind of one of the only ways that we can really check out or kind of temporarily run away from our suffering. So the schedule is to try to help us, to kind of support us in really facing the difficult mind states and the sleepiness that does arise. And we try to kind of make it balanced and in the middle way, but certainly for some people it might not be enough. Some people might need a lot more sleep than others, so it is good to just at least try this for a week, and then if you find that it doesn't really work for you, then maybe not to spend long periods of time in monasteries. But it is also just a very good way, even if you feel like it's not enough sleep, it's a good way just to challenge oneself. And we have like these ascetic practices that we sometimes take on that the Buddha actually encouraged for people. One of them is the sitter's practice, which is basically just not ever lying down. And oftentimes in the monastery we'll do this once a week, so we might just once a week stay up all night. And for a lot of us that's very difficult, but it is a way of really challenging the defilement of dullness and sleepiness, so that one can really learn how to overcome that hindrance. But if we struggle with that hindrance a lot anyways, then these kinds of practices might be a little bit too much. But hopefully it's something that we can work through the next few days and use it to have some kind of skillful effect on our practice. Okay, this is quite a long note. I'll just kind of summarize quickly and read the first sentence or two. Dear Ajahns, what is your or Ajahn Chah's or the Buddha's thoughts on exploring past lives when there may be a conundrum present? And this person says that for years they've been dreaming about a little child, and they're not sure if this maybe has something to do with their past life. So I think certainly the Buddha, different teachers, they say different things about past lives. The Buddha in general, although he acknowledged that we all have had many past lives, he did encourage people not really to dwell on it so much, and not spend a whole lot of time thinking, what was I in the past, what were my previous lifetimes. It tends to be something that we just kind of get lost into, and it can tend to increase our confusion and our suffering. The teachers in our tradition, I think generally they also, tend to say the same thing. It is something that maybe, as one's meditation gets stronger, it's something that we can, investigate and contemplate, but I think it's something that, always needs to be balanced, and we have to see, when we contemplate that, if it's agitating the mind or it's kind of increasing our confusion or our suffering, then it's probably something that's best not to pursue at that time. And I think, very much like the question yesterday, 2 days ago about the, kind of having visions and meditation, these kinds of experiences. I think it's, very much like this question, if you have dreams about a person and you're not sure if it's, if it reflects something from a past life or something. Yeah, I think it's, it's very much the same case that it's, it's always very important just to keep oneself grounded in the, the practice of mindfulness of the body, and, always coming back to paying attention to if something is agitating the mind, if, to contemplate, these dreams, maybe they're significant or maybe they aren't. The Buddha said there's many different kinds of dreams. The same with, kind of like the visions we were talking about. The teachers say there are, different kinds of visions. There are, those that are significant, and there are those that are, basically insignificant, or just the mind just creating things. And, it's something that the teachers tend to say that, until our meditation becomes very strong, it tends to be the thing that we can't really tell the difference a lot of times. So, if we haven't reached that place in our meditation, it's probably best just to continue to focus on, keeping the mind grounded in the body, learning how to make the mind peaceful, and just kind of setting it aside for the moment. If one finds that one starts to come to a place where the mind is becoming stronger and, one is having a lot of peace in meditation, then we can start to, direct the mind to that kind of question. You can then investigate that dream, but it's probably something, we really shouldn't do unless the mind is starting to really have a lot of stability in meditation. Okay, dear Venerable Sirs, I followed your advice and found a path of 17 steps to practice walking meditation. As the time passed and I got deeper into the meditation, my path started to become blurry and everything meshed into a sea of colors. I was only able to continue going by memorizing the steps. How can we stay safe while practicing walking meditation as to not trip? Why did the path become unclear yet vibrant? Thank you. Yeah, so there's different possibilities for what could have happened in that particular situation. If it was something that was a result of the meditation, like we were saying a few days ago with the question about having visions and experiences in meditation, certainly there's no limit to what we can experience, once the mind starts to become peaceful, and we can have all kinds of changes in our perceptions of the world around us. So certainly, what you described is very, certainly very possible kind of phenomena to have arising in meditation. Of course, it could also be because of a physical cause. There are physical causes that can cause the vision to become blurry and things like this. I think in terms of walking meditation, especially if you find that you're coming to a place where you're having difficulty walking, then it's probably best to either to stand or to sit down. I find standing actually to be a really great kind of technique to use with the walking as well. If the mind starts to become very peaceful, then you can maybe just to stand for a while. But if even that feels unstable, then certainly it's probably best just to sit down and Yeah, I remember actually. There's a story that I heard a long time ago about a meditation master who was walking meditation, and I guess in the process entered a very deep state of concentration, and then ended up falling into the bushes or something. And afterwards, he had these kind of scratches on his face or something. So maybe it's good just to kind of pay attention, and if you feel like you're starting to become a bit physically unstable, then maybe it's best to kind of sit for a while. Okay, can you share examples of clinging to rites and rituals? Yeah, so this is one of the fetters that's overcome the first stage of enlightenment, the stream entry, and a lot of times the translation it can be a little bit misleading. Other translations, sometimes it's translated as clinging to precepts and practice. So sometimes people interpret that as meaning like, well, when you realize enlightenment, then the precepts aren't important anymore or something, or if you're strictly following the precepts, then then you're attached to them. But I think this translation is a little bit misleading. It very much has to do with really, truly understanding the practice, and no longer believing that the purification of the mind comes about through an external activity. So the kind of rites and rituals, or kind of clinging to clinging to kind of external activities as a means of purifying one's mind. And example is like, it comes up a lot in monasteries, especially when we first arrive. We're very inspired by the ascetic practices and the stories of the great meditation masters, and we hear about them going without sleep and doing quite extreme things like facing tigers and going to charnel grounds and things like this. So we tend to be very inspired by that, and we a lot of times kind of throw ourselves into those ascetic practices, and we tend to believe that those ascetic practices in and of themselves will purify the mind. So we tend to think, if I just barely eat and I barely sleep and I go to a place where there's a tiger living, that my mind is going to become purified, and then I'm going to realize enlightenment. But that's really it's just not true. The more that one understands practice, the more one realizes that ultimately practice is something that's going on within our minds. The external situation, it can be a support for our practice, but it isn't what actually purifies our mind. So it's possible to take on all of those ascetic practices and actually have our defilements be increasing. That's something that we don't really realize in the beginning. It's possible to do a lot of fasting and sleep very little and live around tigers and do that for years, but actually have your defilements become stronger over time. If we're always lost in irritation and fear, a lot of times if we go without food, we go without sleep, it tends to make us really irritable. So then if we're just really critical of everyone and people who aren't practicing as hard as we are, and we're kind of developing that anger, or we're living around tigers and we're just terrified all the time, and that fear is growing, we're actually kind of traveling in the opposite direction. So I think that this is what's being pointed to as, clinging to rites and rituals, with that first stage of enlightenment, also overcoming skeptical doubt. It's like one finally completely understands the practice. One understands what is it that actually purifies the mind and what doesn't purify it, and one understands that it's an internal thing. It's mindfulness. It's right attention, right mindfulness that actually purifies the mind, and not just external things. Okay, Venerable, I heard of some Dhamma teachers who are able to know the state of mind of a meditator, and they give them a meditation practice according to it. I heard some meditators practice forgiveness, metta, vipassana, or whatever practice is given in accordance to their mind. I would love to hear your thoughts about this. Yeah, I mean, certainly there are stories of some of the great meditation masters who are able to know the minds of other people, and living with them, then sometimes they will give their students particular meditation objects or instructions. I think it's also important to know that it's not always necessarily the case. Even if the teacher does know the minds of the students, they might not necessarily give them a meditation object. Of course, finding a teacher like that is not easy, but it's also not necessary ultimately. We kind of want the answer. We want somebody to give us the answer. What's the meditation technique that is really going to work for me? But I mean, I think that a much more helpful practice is just starting with the fundamental technique that the Buddha taught, and then from there kind of investigating for oneself to look at one's own mind and see, does that work? Are there other things? A lot of the meditators and senior monks, they begin with mindfulness of breathing, mindfulness of the body, which is the main meditation technique that was emphasized by the Buddha and is emphasized by our senior teachers. But in the course of that, then they kind of tend to find what interests their mind or what works for their mind, and that's kind of like a natural process. Like the story of Luang Por Sumedho, like he early on as a monk, practicing meditation in the way that was traditionally taught, and then he started to notice this, what he calls the sound of silence, which is like this, kind of humming that's always in the background, and he was just really drawn to that, and he just kind of started using that as his main meditation object because he found that it really worked and it was something that was present all the time. And the story is like when Luang Por Chah asked him, when he was a young monk, Luang Por Chah asked him like what his meditation object was, and Luang Por Sumedho, he didn't want to tell him because he was sure that like since it was this unconventional technique that he was using, that Luang Por Chah would tell him, no, don't use that, go back to the breath. So he kind of didn't want to tell him, but in the end, he finally, told him he was using the sound of silence, and Luang Por Chah, I think, just asked, like what it was or like what the effect was on his mind. And then when Luang Por Sumedho told him, then he just, okay, yeah, just keep doing that, if it has the right effect on the mind. So I mean, yeah, we can try to find a teacher that will give us, the right meditation object, but I think, kind of a better way, maybe better for ourselves and also better for developing, kind of strength and confidence in our own practice is really just to investigate what works for us. If Luang Por Sumedho had asked Luang Por Chah what meditation object he should have used, maybe Luang Por Chah wouldn't have said the sound of silence. Maybe that just wasn't something that he would have really been aware of. I think it's ultimately it's something that's it's best to really learn for ourselves. Okay, so we just have 2 more minutes, and just quickly, I'm not sure if I totally understand. The question is, what are some good questions to ask pain? I guess like, are you permanent? Are you are you really mine? Do I really have to be affected by you? I mean, those are some of the assumptions that we have in terms of pain. It's like this is my pain, and it's a really solid thing, and it's something that I have to get rid of in order to be happy. I can't possibly be happy as long as it's present. I remember there's a story of Ajahn Panyawado just kind of sitting with some pain, and he said he had quite a very deep insight, very deep experience, just examining that pain and asking, is this mine? Is it permanent? And the more peaceful that our mind is able to become, or the stronger that our meditation is, then the more we can start to investigate and see, do we really have to be moved by pain or overwhelmed by it, or is it possible for our mind to be completely separate from it? Okay, it's about 2:15, so maybe we can end there for today. Thank you.